Greetings. Welcome. Come in. Come and say hello. Come and sit with me for a bit. Sorry, I should text it on that. Anyway, there's the singing bowl, and here I am, and it's Sophie's voice. Time for us to have a chat. How is everyone today? Hope everyone's well and enjoying all the nice thundery, blustery weather we've been having here in Adelaide. Lots of rain, which I guess is always good. I hope it just doesn't get too sort of, like, I think sometimes it comes at the wrong time too much. It can ruin crops and things like that. So fingers crossed everything's well and that nobody's doing anything wicked to our weather, which is quite on the cards. You never know who's doing what these days. We're in the new reality of everything's a conspiracy. Hard to know what's true and what isn't. Speaking of which, I was talking to a friend about AI, and it's becoming a bit of a problem. Like, a lot of people are sharing stuff that is AI. So I think we really need to get educated. I don't know if I can help in some way. I feel like I've been shown things by, people, maybe younger people that you have on hand that kind of you can get to understand things. And if you're not, things look so convincing if you're not kind of trying to discern it, and the trouble is it can mix together elements of truth with made up stuff and pretending to be real. It can get really confusing. So I don't know, we've got to really be on the watch out and learn to pick up the little indicators of AI. And you can see them still. I hope it doesn't get to the point where you can't see them still. We'll just have to give up video altogether at that point, I think, video and recording, because, but at this stage you can pick it. There's little faults, and there's sort of things like, and maybe really clever ones, they can do it, I don't know. But people that are making money off it just to churn out videos and get clicks, like animal videos and stuff like that, they haven't gone to great deal of trouble, and you can usually pick up the faults in it. But it seems really awful thing to do. It's awful that people do things like that and trick people. Hi, Mowgli. All right, so I was just going to, today I was going to talk about, does God want us to be rich or poor? I think it's an important question to ask, to think about. What does money mean? What is its role? Does God want us to be poor? Like Jesus said, blessed are the poor. Does that mean you're only blessed if you're poor? Or is the prosperity gospel, the prosperity teaching, is that true, that God wants to bless us and wants to give us good things, and that we're children of God, so we don't have to go without, or and be in a poverty mindset. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. I might as well just get on with that. All right. So when I was first a Christian, long time ago now, it was raving Pentecostalism. That was where I connected in with Christianity, and I'm very grateful for it. It was a wonderful experience. I couldn't keep going. I sort of ended up falling away from that and went on a whole different journey, which has been wonderful also. Well, horrible and wonderful in the sense that God uses it all, and I feel like I've learned so much, and God's brought me into wisdom, a lot of wisdom. But I learned a lot in the initial time of being in that Pentecostal period. So this would be like the 90s, 80s, no, 80s, late 80s, I guess, late 80s, early 90s. And so one of the teachings that was being taught in the church at that point was about the idea of a spirit of poverty. So spirit of poverty and I think people who aren't part of that movement don't understand when you say a spirit of poverty, what you mean. You're talking about a sort of a principality, like as if there's a spiritual atmosphere, when you say a principality, it's like a demonic realm that sort of rules over an area. and it can rule over your family. That it's a way of conceptualizing whatever it is we're talking about. And there may be more cleverer ways of understanding it, but this is one way of understanding that, like with a spirit of poverty, that if your family has a spirit of poverty, the idea was that you're sort of locked in. No matter how hard you work and no matter what you do, you can never really have enough money, and you're always feeling insecure about money, and it seems to go and in ways that others may not experience, and so it's a poverty spirit, it was called. And when I first learned about it, I've identified it as something. I mean, it was very exciting at that time. All the teaching, you're getting all this teaching, and a lot of it you could go, oh yeah, that's in my life, and start to pray about that and to get rid of it. And so I came from a background of, I suppose you'd call it poverty. It doesn't feel like poverty. That feels like the wrong word, because both my parents were very not money oriented, and we came from a sort of community of people that were not money oriented, and that maybe to varying degrees, and maybe some people had money, some people didn't. So it doesn't mean money wasn't important, and obviously money is always a problem, but if you don't have it, particularly, even if you have it, it can be a problem, hey? But yes, my parents were, both of them, even though they were very different. My mum became very religious. My dad was very staunchly atheist and very unspiritual. But they both were sort of so caught up in the realms of ideas and values and relationships and culture and various things like that are not material, that meant that they were not very oriented towards money. And so in the money system world, the world that runs on money, you kind of go to the bottom of the barrel in that case. If you're not kind of serving money in the money system, you go to the bottom. So that's where you get the cream of the crop. It's actually all sinks to the bottom in this world. So that's where God goes. And that's why I think Jesus said, blessed are the poor. I don't think he said it because he was lifting up poverty as an ideal or as a destination to aim for, which it sort of it becomes very confused in and mixed in with another one of these spirits, we call them, in that mindset at that time of teaching was a religious spirit, or a spirit of religion, which is a mindset also of being overly concerned with the written word and rules and regulations, and trying to please God through being right or doing the right things, and with a lot of sort of accusation and judgment of other people and a desire for control. So that's a whole nother subject. That spirit is very important to understand it and to learn about how to get free from it. But it works in conjunction a lot with this poverty spirit, and the poverty spirit attaches to this idea that God wants you to be poor, and that being poor is somehow virtuous, and it gets you caught in a kind of a constant sort of battle of trying to have enough money to get by, but always feeling a bit guilty about money, and then not having the ability to sort of get past a certain level, and then falling back into always feeling a bit desperate about money. But so I took that on when I first learned about it. As I said, I could recognize it in my family, that there was a spirit of poverty, that we couldn't sort of break out of that poverty space. But the way that it was taught, one of the ways of getting free was to be generous, for one thing, to have faith that God is going to look after you, to watch what you speak, to not be speaking negative things over your finances and over your state, to not be feeling that sense of victimhood, because it's a big part of that poverty spirit is always feeling the victim and feeling that you're in a weak position all the time, and you sort of that sort of becomes part of your identity, that you're poor, sort of thing. So yes, so what I wanted to talk about was I wanted to talk a bit about what I experienced with that, which was I became aware of the ideas of it, and I prayed through it to get free from this spirit. But I never really seemed to get free from it. But I did learn about the mindset and getting out of that poverty mindset. And the funny thing is, this is where that kind of Pentecostal teaching kind of intersects with what you might call New Thought, or popularly kind of expressed through The Secret. So there's a lot of ideas in The Secret that are kind of overlap a bit with this idea of what you confess over your life, and not speaking negatively over your inner thing in your life, that you've got to speak prosperity and speak things going well. What am I saying? I can't remember. I'll just go on to mammon. So there's this idea of mammon in the New Testament. Oh, well, it's just Jesus speaks about it on one occasion. It's not really brought up as a theme generally, but he says something very important, which is, he said, you can't serve God and mammon. He said you'll either end up loving one and hating the other, or because you if you serve mammon and then you're trying to serve God at the same time, mammon's going to demand certain things and God's going to demand things, and there's going to be a conflict. So he's saying you can't serve both God and mammon. And so mammon, the word mammon, it kind of means, I think, I have it in my mind that it has something to do with mammals, like humans, but I don't think it does. I just realized that I had that. But it's actually, it's a word that means money in that time. But it's, the more you dig into it, the more you realize that it's actually the name of a god of that time. There was a god called Mammon, and it was the god of money. And so, and I think that's significant in the sense that of it being a spirit. And so the thing that I've learned about the poverty spirit is it's not just about being poor. It's actually the poverty spirit is part of being under more the spirit of mammon, I think. So this spirit of mammon that Jesus is talking about, which I think is kind of, like people say that money makes the world go around, that in a sense that the world of this age, this world system that is not of God, serves mammon, serves money. That's pretty much what makes the wheels turn. And so Jesus is saying, if you want to serve God, you've got to give up serving mammon, because there's going to be a conflict and you're going to end up hating one or the other. So you have to make a decision to let go of mammon. And I think that's a real tricky one for people. I'll just read 1 Timothy 6:10, which says, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. That's good old King James language, that is right there. So, but that's where that saying comes from, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And that's 1 Timothy, so that's Paul, the apostle, speaking there. And it gets used a lot, that as a saying, that money is the root of all evil. And that's a pretty powerful statement when you think about it, the root of all evil. But I think pretty much it is. Like, if you think about just about anything in our world, that people do stupid and bad things and they sin, but money is the fuel that turns it into evil. It has the power to multiply things that people do in a way that is not natural and couldn't happen if there wasn't the potential of making money. And then the potential of making money, so if you think of something like pornography, like obviously all humans at all time ever have always been interested in sex and finding ways to increase their pleasure or interest in sex. But when you sort of bring money into the picture, then you create something that multiplies something exponentially, so that it becomes as sort of an out of control problem, or a problem, especially of course in our time. It's like crazy with the technology and everything, but money drives that along. It's not going to happen naturally, that kind of thing. Like it will to a degree, but not to a degree that becomes really evil. So yeah, my story was that I wanted to tell was about being aware of the poverty mindset and getting into that, like changing your thinking. But I was always aware that there was something fundamentally that didn't change. And even to the level where I remember going to a church once, and this might put people off because to think of churches talking like this, but they were talking about the idea. So they're quite often pushing this idea that if you give money away, that it's a way of money coming in. So and so that became that, and that it's sort of like, like, these terrible televangelists that kind of pleading for money and like telling you that you're going to get rich if you give money to us, kind of gets abused terribly. But underneath it, there is a kind of truth to it. That there's something about breaking the hold of mammon. And so I'm not saying that the people that are telling you, give us your money and you'll get rich, give us your tithe and God will bless you. That there's truth in it, and it can be misused. And so that I found that there was something about breaking the hold of mammon. So even though I was in a poverty spirit, it's like so like mammon, I feel like you can change your mindset, and that's a really positive thing, to get out of a negative and poverty and victim mindset. But just getting into that, changing that mindset, doesn't get you out of that spirit. And that it felt like it did take me, like, so that you can be in a poverty mindset, but you can still love mammon. You can still be serving mammon without realizing it, because you're born into that system. And that mammon, money, is like a god. It is like something that feels like I have to play by the rules of money, so money will look after me. I have to do the right thing with money, so money will look after me. It feels like money is security, that it is the answer, that it is, that if you haven't got it, you're lost, and that money is kind of like salvation, is going to bring you salvation. And so that's a real problem. And so it's interesting to think about, what is money? Is money wealth? I think God is trying to show us that money itself is not wealth. You think of it as that it is riches, that you have a stack of money and you feel like you're rich. But in actual fact, you're not. Money is not in itself anything. It's a symbol of something. It's a symbol of value. It's a way of us understanding as a community what has value by how much money we place on it to give it value. But the thing itself is actually where the value is. So if someone makes something, a chair, and it's beautiful, it's a beautiful chair, and then you say it's worth this amount of money, that's just putting a value on it, letting you know the value of the work and the labor, the materials, everything that's gone into it. But the money itself is nothing. It's just a symbol of the value of the chair. So the chair is the thing that has value. And so So money, that symbol of value, becomes an idol. And so then you worship an idol and it makes you feel comforted. I'm not saying people are consciously worshipping money, but it's something to be disentangled from and to be aware of, to get disentangled from, to know. And not everyone's got this problem, obviously, but yeah, it's good to be aware of it, and to understand that value, and like Jesus talks about, that where your treasure is, your heart will be there. That will be where your heart is. So don't invest your heart and your don't take as your treasure all the things that don't last forever. So even the value of the chair is somehow, it's not that it doesn't have value, it's that recognizing that the beauty of the chair, the beauty itself, is like a spirit, that you might see it in this chair one moment and you might see it in another chair. That chair might get broken and lost. So you don't put the value in the object. And once again, that somehow connected it into this mammon system. Where am I? I'm losing my train of thought. Eek. So does God want you to be rich or poor? I think God wants to bless you, and that can mean all kinds of things at all different times. And the thing that I realized after I'd been under this teaching about the poverty spirit, and I was trying to be so not poverty minded, but I started to realize that like everything, there's two sides to a thing, which I sort of see as like the two sides of your soul. And what I started to realize is that there's a whole half of your awareness of value of things, which is which I was kind of identifying with this poverty spirit, and I was trying to reject it. And then I realized it's actually something really beautiful about the taking care of your resources and being very frugal, and the whole waste not, want not kind of label. Is I started to realize that is like you don't have to be afraid of that. I didn't have to sort of get away from that because that's my poverty mindset. It's like I realized that there's two sides to it, and it's, to me, it's in my mind, it's like the mother and the father, the left and the right, the masculine and the feminine, and that you need both. That if you don't have the extravagant masculine that sees that has visions of grandeur and doesn't care about the waste and is going to do amazing things, and will draw money in because of that confidence and that forward motion. And then there's this other side, which tends to be the mothers and the women tend to be very aware of small value and like drawing value out of things and not wasting and using this, and that there's a real pleasure in that, in reusing things and not wasting anything, but that if you cut off from the other side, that mindset can end up being a poverty mindset and get you into bondage. So like anything, you need both to balance each other. And so the thing I felt was like, it's like as though that just doing it on a mindset level, you can maybe swing between those two things. One is like the prosperity gospel that's a bit cut off from this other side that understands the beauty of maybe poverty, even like enjoying it. Like sometimes you can just sit in that space of not having money, but enjoying making use of everything you've got in a really beautiful way and sharing with people and not being caught up in that sort of power side of money. So yeah, having the two working together so that they don't get out of control, either one. And then I think that when people get out of control into the prosperity gospel, I think they're sincere people. I think they start off sincere and they really, but it's like anything, if you get unbalanced, if you uncouple from the other side, and only think this is God's way, this is God's way, and you get preoccupied, and it's like, oh, that poverty mindset, that's the enemy. I've got to fight that, and I've just got to be in this prosperity and wealth. That's what God wants to bless me. God wants to bless me. God wants to bless you. And it gets out of control because it needs to be counterbalanced with this other side that says, come back here and just sit in the poverty, and it's okay, and you don't have to be afraid of it. And so what happened to me is I feel like I actually got delivered of the actual poverty spirit, but that only happened like maybe a couple of years ago. And it was to do with breaking the hold of money over me, in the sense of, like, I had, like I said, I've been shifting that poverty mindset by being generous, by never taking on a victim mentality, even if I knew that I was in a tight position financially compared to other people, that I always take the attitude that I can bless people, I can do whatever I need to do, and that God will take care of me, and that good things will come to me as they're needed. But there was something that happened where a few years ago, there was somebody who was kind of undeserving. They were in a community situation I was involved in, and somebody had robbed them. When I say they're undeserving, it means it wasn't like an inspiration that I really wanted to help them. I felt sorry for them, but somebody had apparently stolen $700 out of this home, and I didn't, in my humanness, feel motivated to do anything about that except to sympathize and say I'm sorry about that. But I felt like God said, you give it to her, you give her $700 and replace it. And I was like, oh no, I don't think that was God. Like, I don't know. And I was praying about it and asked a friend about it, like, what do you think? And I just didn't feel enough conviction to carry through on that, and really felt like it was a funny one, because it was a real feeling of like, yeah, just do it. Just do it. It's okay. Like, I'll bless it, and, just do it. But I denied, and I wrestled with that, and it went on for a few months, weeks, I think, maybe. And eventually I was just busy, and it just went to the back of the pile. And I thought, yeah, no, I don't think that was God. And no, it probably wasn't God. And life went on, so I didn't worry about it. And then down the track a few years, I was in a situation again, still still always feeling really tight about money, never sort of breaking through with money, and things that had happened to me. Like, that's what I was going to say, that I was at a church once, and they were trying to convict us about money and about breakthroughs, about blessing. And I remember they said, if you, then it was like a heightened faith moment, and like, if you give this amount of money. When I think about it, the church that it was, they weren't really a very money-oriented church, I think, but so it's a funny situation. But I remember there was this idea of like, you go and see, like, test this. If you give, say, $20, God will bless you. How do you say that in reverse? Like, you'll get, like, if you give 20, you'll get 200, kind of thing. And my faith was elevated, so I said, okay, I'm going to give it a go. So I put in my $20, and I went home, and I had a bill for $200. and it was, so it was supposed to be, do this, and then God's going to honor that, and you're going to end up with being blessed for the amount that you've given, 10%. How do you do that? It's not 10%, it's the other way, 90%. No, I don't know. I can't think. But anyway, it'll be a multiple of 10 of what you've given. That was what it was. And so I just thought it was so ironic that I went home, I opened up a letter, and there was a bill, an unexpected bill, like something that was like a fine, or I can't remember what it was, but I remember it was $200, and I just I thought, that's typical. But the interesting thing about that was, I thought it was that it felt significant, that it wasn't just that it didn't work. The fact that it worked in reverse meant that it was still somehow a spiritual principle at work, but it was a negative one. So the way I understood it is there was some sort of spiritual hold on my life that was like, yeah, nah, you're trying to get blessed by God, but I'm able to block that still. That was what it felt like to me. Because there was a lot of spiritual investment in my life that felt like there was layers of things that has taken God a long time, and it's still going on, and I'm still happy for God to do whatever, like change whatever and keep doing that deliverance, because even though it's hard to start off with to have God pulling you apart and doing all this, it gets easier and easier as you go along, and the more you understand the process and the more you can get those cues of when something's being dealt with, and like do whatever it is, do it quickly. But so yeah, I was a bit more cautious about just giving money away, hoping that it would come back in multiples. But the thing that I felt was that you do shift mindsets, but mindsets are different to spirits. So I was shifting mindsets, and that's the part you do have control over more, is you're part of actively renewing your mind into God's way of thinking and what God wants to teach you. And that's an act of will, that you've done things this way, and it's like, now I'm going to do things this way. I'm going to renew my mind, change the way I think, change the way I speak. But that there is deliverance dimensions that is more like delivering a baby. You don't know when you can't always control it. You can do things to set things in motion. You can be willing, you can want things, but you can't necessarily, in the same way that you can renew your mind, you can't necessarily break the holds of spirits. That's something that happens on the spiritual realm, in the spiritual realm. And obviously people have gifts of deliverance, and they are discerning in that, and that's what they do. But the thing that I felt was, when this thing did get broken in my life, it felt like, when I look back on it now, I think it's probably because there were layers of deliverance and change that God was doing, and spiritual shifts that were in stages. I once had a vision when I was a really young Christian, and I was actually praying for someone else, and I thought it was for them. And it was like years later, as I was going through so many different trials, I thought of this, and I thought, oh, that was about me. It was a word for me, for God to show me what was going to happen in my life. And what the vision was I was with Jesus, and there was a pit in the ground, and there was a little lamb that was trapped in a trap. So it was something that had been set for an animal, and it was trapped in there. And I was there, and it was my job to free the lamb. And Jesus was there, and Jesus was giving me instructions. So, but it was like a really complex trap, and there was layers upon layers of different things, and that you had to do it in the right order, because if you did it in the wrong order, you'd set something off and it would kill the animal. So it was very precision, and I was watching Jesus, and and he would say, no, put that one over there. I was just thinking, it's a bit like that one of, getting instructions and cut the red wire before the blue wire, or the world's going to blow up. It was a bit like that. So I had to get it exactly right to move one thing ahead of the other, because there was a correct sequence that had to be followed. And that Jesus understood what it was, and that he was instructing me and teaching me, and I was learning how to do that. And so when I think of that now, I think of that's what it's been like. It feels like that's what it's been like in my life. And so you might be back here at the beginning going, I'm going to get free of the poverty spirit, but you don't understand necessarily the layers that maybe have to come before you're in a place ready to take the actions, to have the faith to be able to step out of that. And so so what happened was, I'd been contemplating, this idea of like setting a figure of how much money you want to make a week. And I was thinking, that's right, it was like thinking of a tithe. What would be the tithe? And to start tithing for the amount of money that you want per week. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling tonight, so I just thought I'd just go with it. So I don't know if anyone's still with me, but anyway. It's interesting for me. So the thing that so it was this idea that I was going to, the amount was sort of way out of my reach as a tithe. And there was something about it that was like breaking through on this level of money and of sort of like paternal care in my life, if you know what I mean. Like if I haven't had a really strong father figure and I'm trying to break through into that, the paternal and God as father, and that's kind of the realm of money really, I think, is the father realm that provides and kind of understands how to navigate that world. And so there was this idea that I had to weekly give an amount that was way out of the range of what I had to give, that I couldn't afford it. But so this was nothing to do with church, even though I ended up giving it to a church that I was going to. It wasn't them demanding it or asking it. They were actually a really great church, and they never even preached about giving money. But at first I was like resisting. It's like, this can't be. I don't think God would want me to give it. But it was like this feeling of like, no, I had to shift out of this attachment to money and this feeling that money was somehow keeping me safe, and shift into faith, that faith is the currency of the kingdom, not money. Money is not the currency of the kingdom. Money is a tool that we use still on the earth, and it's useful, and it's not a problem. It's not a big deal. But faith is the currency of the kingdom of heaven. And so I could feel that nudging, and it ended up that God wanted me to do it for 10 weeks, and it was $70 a week, and it was going to end up to be $700, which was exactly what I felt prompted to give to this person who had been robbed. And so I went through that process of doing that, and through those weeks I could feel a shift. There was something happened, something changed. And so since then, I feel like I have a very different relationship with money. Even though I was never money oriented, as I said, my family wasn't money oriented, but it was still like just being at the bottom of that mammon system. You know, you didn't value mammon, but you were still in that system, and you've got to get transplanted out of that into the kingdom system, which is very different. And so now I feel it's like now, even though I'm not from an outsider point of view, I'm not in a very strong position financially, but I feel like money, I have plenty of money. It's the weirdest thing. I feel like it's sort of a bit like magic. I can't explain it, but I just feel in a very rich and prosperous state in my life at the moment. And even though, as I said, I'm actually on the dole technically, but everything feels really great. And I just like, so it's a different relationship I have with money. It's changed. That's all I can say. And it's wonderful. And on that note, just to finish off, I am going to be starting back into setting up my business as an artist and a creative, and set up the Delight of Being creative community thing as a business again. And looking forward to that. So thanks to Jane who got in touch with me about that. I'm really stoked about that. So I'll get my book finished, and I start up my small business again. So I hope that was interesting to someone, and someone found that of interest. Ask me any questions you like. It's big part of life, isn't it, money? And tell us, has it ever been a problem for you, or have you just always had money, you've never had to think about it? All right. God bless. See ya.